Welcome to the Hispanic Leadership Summit 2020. I'm super excited to be moderating what I believe is one of the most important topics, quality of education for every Latino. My name is Lily Gangas. I'm the Chief Technology Community Officer at the Caper Center, where we're focused on removing barriers to increase the representation of people of color, explicitly Black, Latinx, and Indigenous community members into the tech sector as well as the tech startup world. And so for me, specifically, education is personal because I have fostered my own continuous learning and as an engineer to making different pivots in my career, but specifically as an immigrant Latina, I have seen a lot of and have lived a lot of the barriers that now I work on to tackle for other community members. So topics like these are things that we need to continue to double down. But in this new world of COVID recovery and how do we move forward, not just locally here at the California or even a national level, but even at a global level. I think these are important discussions that we need to be having and really focusing on what is working, what can we scale. And so for today's panel, I'm super excited that we have an amazing set of experts, thought leaders, but also change makers who have done immense work. Today, we are honored to have Guillermo Miranda, the head of corporate social responsibility, vice president of IBM, Paloma Escudero, director of communications, UNICEF, Juan Salgado, Chancellor, City Colleges of Chicago, and Arnie Duncan, former United States Secretary of Education. So please give me a virtual warm welcome to this amazing panel. And so what are we going to be covering today? I'll jump really fast to just give a quick overview. The discussion that we'll be diving in today is really focused on a sustainable development goal number 4, which is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. And as I shared earlier, education is the most important priority for the Latino community, especially in this new COVID world where we're digital first, whether we were ready or not. There's now a whole new set of world and skills that we now have to all gain. And unfortunately, we know that a lot of our community members were not ready for this shift. And so what can we do? We've seen the impacts of this as millions of students have gone on to distance learning. We've seen also the limitations of being able to find jobs and opportunities, but there's an opportunity here. And so what can we do? So putting equity in education and lifelong learning is really the key issue for this community. And also education is a long-term economic strategy. It is the single most important area that can accelerate progress and allow every Latino to achieve their potential. So in this session, we're going to identify, prioritize key areas of collaboration for change. So with that said, let's get started. And I want to give a warm welcome again to all of our panelists. How are you all doing? I'm going to do a quick round just to make sure that I get to introduce yourself and you can let us know where you're joining us from today. Paloma, why don't we start with you?
So much. I'm Paloma Escudero. I'm joining from New York, and I'm the Global Director for Communications for UNICEF. So a pleasure to be here.
Okay, and now Guillermo, what about you? Where are you joining us?
Yes. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are in the world. Guillermo Miranda, the head of Global CSR and the president of the IBM Foundation from Washington, D.C. today.
Great. And Juan?
Hello, everyone. Juan Salgado, Chancellor of City Colleges of Chicago. So I am in Chicago and happen to be in my dining room right now, specifically.
Great. And Arnie, where are you joining us from today?
Hi, Arnie Duncan. I'm not in Juan's dining room, but we're both in Chicago together.
Sounds great. Well, and I'm here in LA after spending some time with the family. So shout outs to anybody from the West Coast as well as to the East Coast. So with that said, let's get started. I think being able, and Paloma, I'll start with you. Given that you've done your work of early child education at a global lens, what are some of the biggest barriers that you've seen at the global that we should all be also learning more about, specifically for the Latino community?
Well, if you were asking me a year ago, I would be telling you that it would be the access to quality in education and learning, especially in early childhood, before the age of 5, and also for the secondary education. What we were fighting before the pandemic was really what we call a learning crisis, because we knew that kids starting primary school were starting with very low levels of literacy, on numbers, on reading and others, and especially with a huge disparity between the, let's say, the more the people, the most vulnerable parts of the population in every single country in the world, but especially I would say the US was not really getting great numbers. But also, even that the learning crisis gets even bigger in secondary education when those kids have continued to have had challenges during primary. And then, of course, what we see in the secondary education, especially among the boys, is a huge level of dropouts. So that's what we were trying to fix, and we were trying to discuss and propose solutions with all the education authorities, teacher trade unions, and others all around the world. But then the pandemic came. And then now we are two huge barriers. One of the key barriers, of course, is going to be the access of schooling. We are talking in geographies like Latin America, where 98% of the school-aged children have been out of school for 7 months, and only 20% of the students, we can say, that have been keeping up with the studies through quality online learning. The bulk of the students have missed a whole school year, and there is high percentage of them that are declaring not returning to the academic ladder, especially because they have moved into informal economy or others. And of course, impossible for any family with kids of the ages of 3, 4, 5 to really be having meaningful early childhood education online. But then now we are tackling a bigger issue, and is that 2/3 of the school-age children in the world, 1.3 billion kids, have no connectivity, have no access to quality online education. And that's going to be a huge barrier, because from now on, education is going to be hybrid, no doubt. And it's going to be, the online education is here to stay, but the reality, and also I would say in the US, we are discussing that with a lot of mayors and communities. We even have lots of kids in the Latino community and Afro-American communities and others who are joining classes through the mobile phones of their parents. They don't have access to tablets, they don't have access to internet, and that is going to become the big divide. This is why in UNICEF, we have put ourselves on a target, working with fantastic tech partners and beyond, to make sure we have an additional 500 million kids coming from the most vulnerable parts of our society connected to internet by December 2021, aiming to avoid a second year of academic dropouts as we are going to have in this school year. So we would say it's unprecedented. I mean, the setback we are having only in a few months on the progress we have done on education is enormous. And our main concern at the moment is going to be on early childhood. We have done so much progress in the past, really getting access to free universal early childhood education. Now, in a lot of schools, even they are not offering the online option, but also very serious impact on the secondary education and on kids who really are not going to be able not only to graduate formally on academic, but really perhaps even to have meaningful learning experiences to prepare them for their first job or to be moving into the outside world once they leave school at the age of 18. So I would say that, yes, for many years to come, we will be talking about the education crisis or the impact on the online learning. And just to finalize, because I see here very good experts on online education. Also, one of the key barriers at the moment is that parents are associating online education, online learning with poor quality education. They consider this is not comparable with education that the kids will be having if they could have full access to their school. And this is happening in the US, but this is happening in every single country of the world.
Thank you so much for sharing those data points as well. And I'll transition to Arnie specifically to take a look at it in a deeper sense into the US lens. There's been data, for example, that's been shared about just this past year, right? And which was about 15 to 16 million students were actively not connected overnight because of COVID and not being able to have the access to internet, to have access to the laptops, and then now access to meaningful education, as Paloma mentioned. Juan, I wanted to ask you from your perspective, specifically working on the ground in the community college level, what have you seen specifically with that demographic, some of the barriers in the Latino community? Where are they coming from? Because one of the areas that I don't think a lot of people may be aware of is that the power of the community colleges.
Well, I think when you think about the students that are in post-secondary education, that are in higher education, and you think about Latinos, overwhelmingly, Hispanics are in community colleges. It's well over 50%. I think it's 52% of Latinos are within higher education, are within the community college setting. In fact, 41% of all undergrads are in community colleges today. And so community colleges are an essential element of the higher education system, even more so for the Latino community. And it stands to reason for lots of different factors, including, by the way, cost. We've seen the reality that incomes have not risen very much over the last 10, 20 years, while the cost of education has increased dramatically. And so it's incumbent upon the higher education system working with K through 12 to make those transitions a lot more smoother for students. I would say that one of the biggest challenges I think that we face as a community is both our students' ability to be college ready, both academically, but also social emotionally, and the college's ability to be student ready. And I think one of the biggest barriers we face is our colleges aren't very student ready. They're not ready necessarily for the Latino student, which comes with the Latino family, which comes with a whole host of challenges that our students face as they enter into college. Our students are very supportive of their families. In many different respects. In a community college setting, 50% of our students are parents themselves. So they're not only on their own education journey, but they're supporting their own children in early childhood and other education settings. And so we have to realize, that strength of family and have the kind of supports in our colleges that take that into account. So I think it's a combination of those two things. And I think a lot of it has to do with the education system being better at the transition points. The best moment to actually impact that Latino student and that Latino family is when they're in high school getting ready to make the transition. So helping students to make those more informed decisions and involving the entire family in that process in a more meaningful way. We see students needing to apply for FAFSA a lot earlier sometimes than they often do, and you need a great deal of cooperation from the family in order to do that. Community college students are those that often apply the latest and yet need the most assistance, and so we see a mismatch between the needs that students have and the resources that are available to them in order to continue on with their education.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I think that's one of the, especially even from my own personal experience, when I was at USC, I would say that we had one of the higher percentages of community college transfer students. And I would say in my classrooms, they outshined all my other classmates. And so I think that there's definitely just such raw talent there that meets that transition point is so critical, and new models in this post-COVID world that I think we have the opportunity to reimagine. I think it creates a lot of different opportunities. But before we get into those solutions, I wanted to make sure that we also take a look at a broad level of what's happening across the US from a pre-K through 12 and plus 16, right? Which is taking a look at the entire journey. And so Arnie, with in your background, what are some of the good news and bad news that we should be aware of before we get into the reimagining to help us also not make the same mistakes from the past?
Yeah, we have lots of challenges, but also amazing opportunities, maybe especially now and coming out of this crisis. So the good news, bad news story is that over the past 20, 25 years in the United States, we've basically doubled the number of Latino students with a college degree. The bad news in my mind is we've doubled from 13% to 23%. It's not fast enough. I don't think any of us want to be here at in 2040 and say we're heroes. We're now up to 40% or 45%. It's still less than half the Latino community. That's simply not good enough. So the question for all of us is, how do we accelerate the pace of change? Can we be here 20 years from now and talking about not a doubling, but a tripling or a quadrupling of young people graduating from four-year universities or amazing, two-year community colleges like the ones that Juan runs? And there's no one answer there. I'll go right back to where we started the conversation. For me, the best investment we can make is in high-quality early childhood education. That's the best. If we had one more tax dollar, that's where I would put it. Making sure many more families across the United States, Latino families, have access to high-quality pre-K. That is a game changer. So I want to start right there. Secondly, access to a college preparatory curriculum is hugely important, and not just taking remedial classes, access to physics and chemistry and AP classes. Juan could tell us, but I know a high percentage of the young people coming to him are academically prepared. And we need to, that's not on the community colleges, that's on us K-12 to do a better job there. Here in the United States, we have to make sure, and it breaks my heart that we have refused to get this done, we have to make sure that our DACA students have access to financial aid to be able to afford to go to college. They are our future job creators, entrepreneurs, innovators. The fact that so many young people work so hard, get great grades, sometimes are valedictorians, community leaders, and then we close the door, we slam the door shut of opportunity, going on to the higher education level. That has to change. So a lot of work ahead of us, but also, I'm very, very hopeful. I've seen during this, very difficult pandemic time, I've seen school district after school district get devices to young people. My good friend Pedro Martinez runs the San Antonio School District, heavily Latino, heavily low income. These 49,000 students. They gave out 47,000 devices and Wi-Fi connections. People working so hard to overcome these barriers and give our children a chance to fulfill their tremendous God-given academic and social potential.
Definitely. And I think that gives me the chills as well to know that we have to keep mobilizing, especially now. I do think that there's, as you were mentioning, a new foundational learning environment, which is having the right devices, the access to the internet, as was mentioned earlier, but then also having pathways, right? Especially into the sciences and STEM. And I know that that's something, even for my own personal journey of being an engineer, I know that we've been trying to get more people of color, specifically Latinx, also into tech, and our numbers are still not represented. However, there are also a lot of new models and programs that I think are coming up and developing. And Guillermo, this is actually a really great example of some of the work that you've been doing at IBM with PTEC. For the folks who may not be aware, PTEC is Pathways into Technology Early College and High School programs that IBM has been running. So Guillermo, can you share a little bit more about the program that you've been running, and also, to Arnie's point, what can we do to continue to scale these types of programs to get to the 10x level?
Absolutely. So PTEC is a public-private partnership where you put together an industry partner, a high school district, and a community college. And together we organize a 6-year journey for students to graduate both with a high school diploma and an associate degree. And PTEC has been here almost 10 years. We have now PTEC working around in 28 countries in the world, 11 states in the US, 265 schools, 150,000 students in the pipeline, and specifically in the US, more than 80% of the students in the US are from underserved communities, Black communities, Latino communities. And PTEC is trying to break 3 paradigms. The first paradigm is that the industry is not part of the education. The industrialization create different sectors, and the companies were waiting for the graduates to finish and then hire them, completely retrained to be useful, and start working in a company industry environment. So companies should be part of the force of the education sector and should be embedded. Just go a little to history and understand how the guilds in the Middle Ages were the ones that provided the workers and created the professions. Okay? The second paradigm that we are trying to break is the paradigm that a college degree is the only passport for success. And as a good Latino myself, I heard my grandmother saying, you go to university, you go to university, you have to be a lawyer, you have to be a doctor, you have to be an engineer. And this is embedded in our heads. And some of us have been lucky to have that path, but it's not the only path. There are other paths, especially in this digital-driven economy, that opens up the opportunity for a great career. And you can do many things with an associate degree, with a technical university experience. And the third one, the third paradigm that we are breaking is the paradigm that you have to pay for higher education in the US. And this is a big challenge because you can see all the statistics about the student debt and how this creates a separation between the haves and the have-nots. So PTEC is here to change that paradigm and help kids to get graduated without spending a single dime, get an associate degree without spending a single dime. And we are working in Chicago. We are proud to have 4 PTEC schools in Chicago that are progressing. So thank you, Juan, for being there. And the big thing is about how you create the partnerships. This is an ecosystem. This is not a single option. This is an ecosystem where you have industry partners, you have the school system, and then the community college. And we launched the Hispanic Start Tech Skills Initiative, where we are trying to recruit more industry partners to go deeper in areas where the Latino community is higher. Like Texas is a big success for PTEC. This year, we are going to get closer to 100 schools in Texas. If it's not for the COVID, we will be expanding a little further. And it's not about a single company. There are more than 600 industry partners behind PTEC. So I will not get you more, but you can go www.ptec.org and all the details are there.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that that's so such an important discussion to have about what are market relevant opportunities and learnings, and especially as we start to get into think of the longer term post-COVID and just in general, the systemic barriers that have been there in education, but ultimately to be able to get new jobs with better pay, right? So then that way we could actually start to close the racial wealth gap as well, which to me is really the North Star. To be able to provide those longer term opportunities. And Juan, this is a question for you. As Guillermo mentioned, that partnership, right? What are some of the new models, or maybe bringing back simpler models? Is the innovation, maybe the innovation is in the simplicity that's more focused on outcomes based. But from your experience, if you can share a little bit more of what's working, what have you seen working, especially in your role of market relevant learnings, partners, but also making sure that the content and the outreach is culturally relevant to the Latino community. What has been your special mix that other folks can learn from?
Yeah, so as Guillermo mentioned, we are working with PTEC as we are working with many other companies. And so the one thing that's worked really well for us is working with private industry to align our curriculum to the demands in the marketplace. And that is not a limiting factor, it's an expanding factor. It allows a student to be able to take advantage of certification programs along with an associate's degree, along with a bachelor's degree. And all of the credits that you're earning, whether you're earning them in high school or whether you're earning them in our environment, are going to stack up to that higher level credential, right? And so, stackable credentials Aligning to industry standards is really important, number one, and staying relevant to what is needed in the marketplace. So what that does is it expands the number of opportunities available to our students, and it expands the number of pathways. And people have very different lives, and so when you speak about culturally relevant, it has to be relevant to their lives. Their lives change, right? Today, you're not married. Tomorrow you are. Today you don't have a child. Tomorrow you are. Today you might have an obligation in your home. Tomorrow you might not. And so, we're really instituting, lifelong learning here, and pathways for lifelong learning are going to be really important. I do want to say something, briefly, is universities and community colleges have to work stronger together. Okay. We are now moving toward guaranteed admissions agreements with our universities. It's not whether our students will end up at a program at the university. It's if they do this, they will have a spot. It's guaranteed. When you sign up with city colleges, you have a guaranteed admissions now to the University of Illinois engineering program, as long as you meet their requirements. So we're setting up these new programs, and then we're supporting students. And I want to make sure, I get this in. Chicago is, Arnie talked about the importance of supporting our dreamer students. In Chicago, under the leadership of our previous mayor and with the support of our current mayor, we created the Chicago Star Scholarship. If you get a B average from a Chicago public school, community college is completely free to you. You have 3 years to complete your 2 years of coursework. And all you have to do is perform in high school. And that doesn't take into account in any respect your citizenship status. And so Dreamers are eligible for this, as is any other student. And by the way, in terms of accelerating process, those students are graduating at 3 times the graduation rate of any other student within our system. Why? Because we've taken one stressor off of their plate and said to them, hey, focus on your studies, get it done, now's the time to do it. And so I think the combination of working with industry and working with universities, along with the requisite student supports, and by the way, it's not just financial. We've got wellness centers for our students and tutoring supports, because while a student may get a B average at a public school, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are fully academically prepared. Arnie mentioned, look, 75% of our students are not at the college readiness level where they can take an English 101 course or the entry-level math course that's required. That's not a problem. We'll work with the students, but it does slow them down. And in many cases, it does hold them back. And so we've got to do a better job of working with K through 12. In Chicago, we're working with our Chicago Public Schools Historic Partnership, trying to backwards map what we can be doing better together to create those stronger links, of which PTEC is one of those major efforts that we have underway, and it's very successful.
Great. And these are all such great topics of why collaborations are important. And Arnie, since also giving your background and experience, if you could go, to the future of the next person that would be in the role of overseeing the Department of Education for the U.S., what are some of the things that you think that specific person should be talking with or encouraging corporations to? What are some of the skills that they need to be also nurturing, but also having that much more holistic approach to understanding that each community is different. The Latino community within itself is very different. What would you say?
Just to build upon the PTEC model, I was really, really fortunate to visit the first PTEC school in New York very early on. I was so impressed, I brought President Obama to come see it. And so just to see that go from a single school to New York to this network of almost a couple hundred schools, across the planet is just extraordinary. So I just want to thank IBM and Guillermo, your team. Just really, really important, leadership. And those public-private partnerships are invaluable. None of us have enough resources. None of us can do it alone. But working together, we can do some pretty miraculous things. So going forward, the world's changed. We all know that. I think we're training young people for jobs that literally don't exist today, that we can't describe. We probably can't even imagine what those jobs are. But what are the skill sets that we need young people to have? They need to be able to think critically. They need to be able to solve problems. They need to be able to work in diverse teams, and they need to be lifelong learners. And if they have those skill sets, they're going to be successful forever. You've talked a lot today about lifelong learners, and the day any of us stops learning is the day we become obsolete. So this is not a birth through 21. This is a birth through 65 or 70 or whatever it might be. And so where young people have those skills, they can adapt, they can create their own jobs, they can bounce from job to job. If they don't have those skills, things get very tough for them. And it's a really interesting situation now where unemployment is high. It's a brutal economy with a COVID crisis. But what's the nature of work? For me, the nature of work is solving problems. That's the nature of work. And last time I checked, there are no shortage of problems to solve. There's an unlimited number of problems to solve. What we don't have is enough young people in any community, but also especially in the Latino community, who have been given the chance to gain the skill sets necessary to solve those problems. And so really focusing on those things, I think for the long haul, set our young people up for success for their entire lives, and moving into a job market, into economy that none of us can honestly begin to fully articulate today what that will look like 10 or 20 years from now. But that's the set of skills every single young person needs to have. And if they have that, then I can be wildly hopeful about their futures. If they don't have that, then unfortunately they get locked out, and that gets pretty scary.
Yeah, and I think that scenario of making sure that they're not locked out is one of the parts that I think Juan also brought up, which is emotional and the mental health, right? As even as parents and adults, they're still living in this space. There's a lot of triggering and maybe past traumas that have been coming up from early childhood. So definitely going back to having a holistic approach to learning, to working, and hopefully redefining that, not the future of work, but the future of workers and the quality of life in general. And on that note, Paloma, this question is for you, specifically giving your background and taking a look of what is the holistic and both deep skill learning, but mental health, and the importance that having mentorships, role models, maybe even different models of different learning mechanisms, such as access to internships or apprenticeships, different models. From your lens, especially since you've been doing a lot of work on the global perspective, what's the importance of that? How can we foster in this post-COVID world, as we get out of it, hopefully, the much more holistic and healthy mindset for the Latino community, especially the Latino students and learners?
I mean, let me build in the fantastic examples that we have been sharing today. I can share the example of a big private-public initiative that we are part of as UNICEF, that is Generation Unlimited, that tries to link a meaningful secondary education with the acquisition of skills, but also with the support for these young people to be entrepreneurs or to be moving into the scaling up of their own projects, of their own solutions. And that brings me to what all of you were saying, no? The importance not only of them, of all the kids, to make sure that they have a platform to be acquiring the skills that they will need to move into the, let's say, adults world, and that could be through the academic ladder, but also that could be in many other ways, through the digital world and others. But then we have to move into mentorships, into grants, into investment grants with zero interest, into a lot of areas of support. So experiences like IBM, at the moment we need those multiplied by the thousands. We really need at the moment these kids to be giving with a dream, to be able to be scaling up and to be able to be setting up their own jobs. It's going to be impossible, as we very well know, with the very high levels of youth unemployment. The formal, the way that in many countries it seems that your kid has to be a civil servant for life, that's over. Or it's going to be working for the same corporate for life, is over. And it's just the set of mind, but it's true. A lot of young people with fantastic ideas, with fantastic projects, cannot jump into the ladder of the financing or into the ladder of how to scale up those ideas. So just it has to be a sort of a revolution of how we are approaching the pre-college. And yes, of course, hopefully we will be having many more opportunities for the Latino communities and for underprivileged kids to be accessing the post-secondary education, but also hopefully it will be not the other way for them to be dreaming and to be finding their own world. And then the second one is also very important, is early childhood, no doubt, early childhood. I mean, those, even I would say in the US now we are seeing certain states, certain counties who are finally opening up for free universal access to education as of the age of 3, and that is the difference. That is the difference, and that has to be universal. And by the way, the benefit is not only for the kid and for his brain development and for getting ready for his learning years, but it's also for the family. And in many countries, we see that the moment there is the access to universal free preschool education is when the mothers, the women, can really also access the labor market, the income in the family progresses. So there's a whole benefit for the society when we really make sure that our kids are in the right type of preschooling at the age of 3. And this is just a different educational system. And yeah, this is the moment to be reimagining the education system to get the new generations ready for the real world they are going to be living in the 21st century.
Definitely, and the world has changed just within the 9 months, right? And so, to Arnie's point as well, there's going to be new jobs that aren't even thought of yet. And I think that this is also the part where that continuous learning of some of these youth to become entrepreneurs much earlier, maybe even starting their own types of companies at a much different pace than maybe we've seen in the past. But those fundings come into the funding opportunities for them is also another barrier that is beyond this panel discussion of education. But I think it's also important to bring into the dialogue, right? Which is how do we fund a lot of this work as well. But going back to, and this is a question open up to everyone. I just go back also to, we've talked about some of the big barriers, the huge problems that we have, but also we've talked about some really great programs and solutions that have been able to scale and show us that you could actually have really great public-private partnerships. And specifically for you all, if feel free anybody to jump in, but also I just want to bring it back to the human level of the importance of mentorship. What are additional programs or maybe fundings that we need to be putting into to foster more of the direct mentorship and knowledge transfer and inspirational aspect as well?
So let me jump quickly with an angle of reimagining mentorship. The traditional idea of mentorship is a relationship to help you grow and to have this continuous interaction. But in a digital world, that not necessarily is the only solution. I think that mentorship can also be moments of time where are critical and not necessarily the same person, that can be like an enabler. And there are many digital platforms now that are emerging to bring this instant mentor moment. Okay, so we need to rethink also that mentorship is only this long-term relationship. Yeah, that's good. But sometimes what we need is an instant mentor, or we need different perspectives. And the digital world can help us to bring that up. And there are fantastic examples that are both private or combination. And I think that now with the investments that we have seen with COVID, and this is clearly a silver lining of COVID, the districts are having much more digital platforms available for everybody. So it's not just for the content or classes, it can be for this concept of instant mentorship. And think on the students as a journey, the same way that we manage consumers in a digital journey for commercial purposes, we need to manage students in a journey to nurture the curiosity and this lifelong learning muscle that we need to build.
But I think that also we have to break ceilings with mentorship. I don't know if the word is mentorship. Yeah, I think it's a bit of, I wouldn't say old-fashioned, but I don't think that the young people that's what they are looking for. But especially with girls, especially with girls, especially from the Latino community, of Afro-American community, we have seen fantastic experiences with the STEM and with the science and with the role models. So I don't know if it's mentorship or if it's role models, but really what we need at the moment is to be amplifying and to be making sure that not only themselves, but because they have to believe in themselves, of course, but even parents realize, okay, that this is possible, that they are role models of the next generation of girls in their 20s, in their 30s, who are doing well, and that's why their daughters should be supported to be moving. So I think that there is a lot at the moment, and I agree, it's more on the online, it's on the influencer side, but the same with the Latino community. I think we need much more exposure of the young generations to fantastic Latino people that against all odds made it. And by the way, made it doesn't mean that they are earning the millions and that they are all working in Silicon Valley and others. It's just people who follow their dreams and really were able to make something that they were passionate about, to start their own little business. Because also I think that sometimes we just put these young people, the role models are just so high up, and you don't succeed if you are not earning whatever, if you don't own the mansions and whatever. No, sometimes really your role models is people who are doing what they believe, what they love, and they are doing well. And I think that that's perhaps something that the digital world allows us to be linking up the sort of the people, but especially I would say that on females and on women, I don't think we are doing enough. It's not only the Michelle Obamas and the Oprahs of this world. There's a lot of mid-career women who could be an extraordinary digital mentors or digital models.
Great. And thank you so much for sharing that. And as we get ready to close, I think we've had a lot of great discussions of the entire ecosystem, right? That we have the opportunity to reimagine the silver lining of all of this. Could we find new ways to just reimagining and centering it on values and redefining what those values are? And I think that the youth, but also their parents and the educators are going to be able to share with us even more if we of their lenses. So quick round, we're just going to go ahead and drop off and close because we're right at time. Your one call to action in 10 seconds. And we'll start with Juan.
Believe in the talent that's around you. There's an abundance of possibilities in every single student. And we just have to believe in them more and invest in them more.
Paloma.
I think reimagine education and make sure that we are not asking our kids the same things that our parents ask of ourselves. The world has changed and the education has to change.
Great. Arnie, your one action the folks can take.
The goal for me is not to go back to quote unquote normal, because normal didn't serve millions of children well enough. The goal is to reimagine education. So thinking differently about technology, thinking differently about seat time versus competency, thinking very differently about the school day and the school year, and giving every child what they need. If we have the courage to do that coming out of this very dark time, then that transforms things for the next couple of decades. If we lack the courage and just sort of fall back to trying to do what we were doing before, I think we sell our kids and our country short.
Guillermo, close us out.
Foster curiosity. Curiosity creates opportunity. And curiosity is not necessarily something that it has to be innate. You can foster curiosity. You can create curiosity. That's what makes the difference, and enable that curiosity with all the resources that are needed.
Curiosity, courage, reimagining, and believing. So with that said, I want to say thank you so much to each of you. I hope that the folks who are able to tune in today, that you have left with examples of what is working, learn more about this, get plugged in. And again, I'm in all hands with you all. We need to reimagine boldly. And so with that, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you at the next session.